First, I'd like to welcome to the WTM stage Mark, CEO of the Strength Explorer. Mark Julian Edwards is a distinguished leadership expert, acclaimed two-time author and TED speaker. With a remarkable journey that seamlessly intertwined the realms of business and travel, Mark's expertise lies in unraveling the essence of the explorer mindset. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Do you hear me? Do you see me? Do I feel included? Or do I just feel a cog in a wheel, a number here? And that's what we're here to discuss. I'm going to first of all briefly introduce myself, and then I'm going to bring in two brilliant co-speakers. So my name is Mark Julian Edwards. I'm the director of the Strengths Explorer. The Strengths Explorer is an organization that partners with teams, individuals, and organizations to bring out the very best of our people. How do we do that? By making people feel included, by understanding people's strengths, by enabling them to use it. I've been doing leadership development work for over 25 years, and the reason why I have the word explorer in the title is I think we're all a bit of explorer, and we're all on our journey. I also have a huge love and appreciation for travel and hospitality, and I'm also a writer for The Lonely Planet. I wrote my own photo portrait book about the people of Mallorca, and have done a fair stint of travel show presenting as well. So that's me. What I'd love to do is invite out Joe and Rosina to a rapturous round of applause, please.
Evening.
So Joe, do you first of all want to introduce yourself?
Yes, morning everybody. Thank you for being here relatively early. I know at World Travel Market, having been here for years before. My name's Joe. I've been in the travel and hospitality industry for many a year, probably many a year longer than some of you are born, looking out into the audience, I have to say. I've had the joy of working for some fabulous organisations, Disney, Universal, Thomas Cook and Natalie for the Royal Caribbean Group. I do identify as she, her. I am a gay woman. I grew up in the 90s when it was very tough from a career point of view. I had to hide myself until I was in my early 40s, which was really tough. Shows how old I am. So I'm passionate about diversity, equity and inclusion, and really be able to drive change in the travel industry. As you heard from Ewan earlier, there's still an awful lot to do. And last year, when I got to the end of my corporate life, wonderful 40 years, I've set up Joevolution, because you have to evolve or you become extinct. And that is all based on working with organisations on their not commercial strategies, but very much their people strategies and DE&I. And because a diverse team is the better team. So we'll talk more about that. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, and Rosina.
Hi, thank you, Joe, for that, and for sharing everything, because I know that that takes a lot of courage to do that, so thank you. My name is Rosina. I have worked in PR for over 20 years, working in the charity sector. I also, and I think it's important to highlight this as well, I've worked in the hospitality sector front of house from the age of around 13, and I think oftentimes we talk about hospitality where we're talking about the head office and the business case, but also I think it's important to highlight that as well. So I've worked in the charity sector and most recently moved into hospitality where I worked at Design Hotels, living in Berlin for 12 years where I was in the PR team there. And I currently work, I moved back to the UK earlier this year and I work in PR. I'm a senior account director at Palm. And I'm also a certified intercultural trainer. So that's where my work with DE&I really comes in, and I kind of blend between hospitality and intercultural training and DE&I.
Thank you so much, both. And it's a pleasure to have two industry experts with us today alongside us. And the idea for this session is that it would be a little bit different, right? Rather than us just sharing, we'll actually have a discussion. And as we're talking about our lives and how we've used strengths, I'd like you all to think about your own lives, your own journeys, and how you can be most fulfilled by using your strengths. So, first of all, let's get a bit of a context to kind of why we're here. In this post-COVID world, talent attraction and retention, as many of you will know, is the #1 hot topic. Right? People are being increasingly choosy. Do I want to join this organization? Is it going to be open? Is it going to accommodate me? And for high talent, retaining people is really, really fundamentally a big challenge right now. Second of all, training and skills development. But in talking about training and skills development, we're talking about personalized training and skills development. Okay, so yeah, I've got a plethora of courses open to me, but in which, is this personal to me? Does it talk to me in my own development? And if we look outside at where the industry is headed, we'll all be aware that it's about it's about experiences. You know, it's not about commodities anymore. It's not about just going to a destination. It's about having a rich, fulfilling experience. And we would argue, well, surely, you know, we as staff, as employees of these travel organizations, we have to have been on our own journey, understand our own strengths, what lights us up, in order to provide that magical experience to our end customers. Employee well-being and work-life balance, absolutely huge. And finally, and probably most importantly, D&I. And the focus here is on the inclusion. So for all those reasons, what we're doing here today in these next 30, 40 minutes is, yes, talking about inclusion, but also talking about exceptionally high performance. Because we all believe that actually if we have an organizational culture where people feel included, welcomed, respected, they're going to want to give more, right? It makes sense. So the way in which we're going to look at this, there's many ways to determine what floats my boat, right? What really, really motivates me. My choice is to really focus on strengths. And I'm going to really elaborate on that deeply. And there's many ways to look at one's strengths. One way is to do a questionnaire. And I am a big advocate for Gallup's Clifton Strengths Questionnaire. This was created by Don Clifton many, many years ago. And he looked at very, very successful people, taking a huge sample of something like 50,000 people, and thought, what do all these people have in common? And he basically found out they didn't have anything in common. The thing they had in common is they understood and could apply their own strengths. So he got hold of this whole database and found out there were these 34 unique strengths that really, really help people to identify what they're uniquely great at. And that's what we're going to be exploring today. But his fundamental question was this: what will happen when we think about what's right with people rather than fixating on what's wrong with them? It's a simple question, but it's very, very powerful. If we think back to our performance reviews, right, and seeing some nods, you know where I'm going here. Probably the first thing was actually, sorry, Joe, you really need to, I know you're great out there and selling the vision, but your time management, we need to have a talk about that.
How do you know?
So this is turning it around and understanding that when we do really use our strengths, we're going to be much more likely to succeed. We know that people who regularly lean into their strengths have 3 times higher quality of life and 6 times more likely to excel in their role. So it's important and it counts, and it makes people feel good. So what are we going to do today? So there's going to be 2 parts to this discussion. First of all, it's being seen. And I'm going to ask, first of all, Joe and then Rosina to actually describe their strengths. So before this session, I sat down with them, I sent this questionnaire, they got their questionnaire, and I debriefed the questionnaire with them, and we're going to be talking about that. In the second part of the conversation, we're going to be talking about how they used their unique strengths to create a climate and a culture for other people to really be seen. Does that sound exciting? Should we go for it? All right. So these are the results of Joe and Rosina. Now, when you do a Gallup Clifton Strengths report, you actually get 34, right? So number 1 is my absolute top super strength. Number 34, shall we say, is my least super strength. And for the purpose of time, we're just capturing here their top 6. So we're going to have a conversation with each person about their strengths. Let's do it. So we start off with Joe. Joe's top strengths are these. We're not going to go into every one, but Joe, as you and I sat down, you said, you know, the 2 strengths that really made the difference to your career was woo and maximizer. And just without explaining the whole theory of this whole thing, basically what woo is winning others over. It's this capacity to walk into a room, to sell the vision, to sell, to win others over. Maximize it is taking the best of the component parts for ultimate benefit, right? So take that'll work, let's make it happen. Joe,
Yes.
so talk to me about, well, talk to everybody about your
Well-
Woo and Maximize and how they've served you.
Okay, first of all, Woo, what's interesting about the whole Strengths Finder and Strengths Explorer is that it is your innate qualities. And interesting enough, I'm sure we've all done numerous assessments of, Discovery Insights, Myers-Briggs, lots of ones over the years. And the great thing about the strengths is that is what its focus is in on, how you then get the most out of your team and your organisation by maximising those strengths and people realising those strengths. And from my point of view, I didn't realise really that I had Woo. First of all, I thought it was a bit rude. I didn't know what it meant until I was told that it was winning others over. And actually, how initially I used to be quite nervous when I went into a room of strangers. I thought I was. What I then realised, though, is that actually I was able to be a great connector of people and maximise that because I genuinely was interested in finding out what makes people tick, what is the difference of each individual. And to me, now when I walk into a room, I actually think that everybody is a business opportunity and or a new friend to meet, as opposed to just a situation of a stranger. So I think the power of that quality from my career point of view has been in the travel and hospitality industry is really putting together different teams overall and actually maximising the strengths of each of those individuals and trying to help them sort of gain confidence and maximise that opportunity.
Yeah, and I would say that when we first met, we met a few months ago at
Yeah.
a conference, and you were doing this facilitation.
Yes.
And I walked up to you and I said, "Thank you, Joe. That was absolutely awesome." And it was a women's only event, and there was just a few of us blokes.
Yeah.
And you couldn't have been more warm and gracious to me, and said, "Well, let's meet up. Let's have a coffee. Let's whatever." And part of that Woo energy is accessibility.
Yeah,
And
I
making
think
others
it's
feel warm.
pulling people in, I think,
Yeah.
is really important.
Yeah.
And I think even more so when it comes again to what we're here about today, is that not just sticking with people like you, and
Yeah.
really so often people stick within their own environment and they don't push themselves out to actually meet people from different backgrounds, from different situations, and truly listen to them and talk to them. And I think that's really important. And I think that links into the whole maximizer point as well. How do you bring together the best of people? My thing is the 3 C's in life, which is really communicate, collaborate, and coordinate. And in everything that I've tried to do, very often some people have said to me, "God, we've gone through this several times." Or why do they need to be involved? Or why do they need to be involved? I'm a great believer. It takes longer to get to the end result. But if all of your team members feel included and truly listened to, the end result is far more powerful.
Absolutely. And we haven't got time, but you'll see some other interesting words on Joe's list. Words like positivity, which is, getting things along, bringing that positive energy to things.
If I could just say,
Yeah.
last night's result, I'm struggling to dig deep on positivity at the moment, but I'm sure
Yeah.
many people in the room are. But we'll find it.
Rosina, let's come over to you.
Yeah.
So thank you, Joe. Thanks very much. So Rosina, these are your top 6 strengths, and then we sat down. You had to think about it and
Yeah.
what's powered up your career the most. It was these 2 ideas of developer and futuristic. And developer, and I should say, first of all, what is a strength, which I failed to do. So in our definition of what a strength is, it's 2 things. Number 1, it's doing something we're good at, which won't surprise you. But the second definition is doing something that gives us joy. It energizes us. So in this definition and of the work that I do, and this conversation, we're looking at those 2 points. So developer is really getting that kick, that satisfaction of seeing others around us really develop, really grow to the next level. And futuristic is his ability to look into the future and kind of play out different scenarios and have joy and have a great capability of thinking, what's next, what's happening in the industry, what's happening in the market. So Rosina, talk to us about how you've used some of these strengths to help with your career.
Well, first of all, interestingly, my ex-HR director is in the audience from when I was working at Design Hotels. And so I'd be interested to talk to you afterwards, Claire, to see if this matches the person that you know very well. But I think with developer, what I really liked about that, and this isn't one of the definitions that you mentioned, was easing the tension. And I'm the daughter of a migrant. My father is Indian. He was born in Tanzania, and he moved to England, and he was a solo parent, 4 daughters, and I'm the youngest. And I think part of that comes very much from my background as the youngest of 4, where I really learnt so much from my father of like walking into a room and diffusing the tension, because oftentimes I think my father was the reason for the tension. As a single father, 4 daughters, Indian, brown man, outskirts of the Midlands, only Indian family. And so we kind of grew up around that. And I think that's what I really liked about it, was that I think growing up, that was something that I was very aware of. And I love to see that I've now turned that into a strength, and I've kind of taken that and take ownership of it. And I'm kind of empowering myself using that. So that was why I really wanted to kind of look at the developer part of me.
And if I could just interject slightly, you know, sometimes there's a danger of just looking at these things as they are. You read the descriptions, that's you, and we label people, you're a developer, you're a positivity, etc. But it's really important to take the time to understand the nuance, right? What sits behind developer, why is that important to you? How does your background, your history weave into that and inform you? So it's really, thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. And also the other thing that I picked up with developer was the affirming humanity and dignity. And dignity is such an important word, I think, within these conversations around DE and I. I think everyone deserves to have dignity, regardless of their beliefs, their religion, their ethnicity, whether we agree with them politically. Still, it's dignity should be, it's a basic human right. So again, I feel that I'm glad that I bring that to the conversation, I bring that to the room. And then futurist, I was really surprised to see that on there. And I know when we had the conversation, I was kind of like a bit skeptical about it. And then when I thought about it, I got excited, because it wasn't until I did the training as an intercultural trainer, and then I took that and I combined it with hospitality, and then all of a sudden it clicked. And again, kind of going back to Claire, I've had so many conversations with Claire over the years about this, and we would get really excited about it, because I feel like that's where I am the futurist. I can clearly see that when you provide your staff within a hospitality organisation with a genuine sense of belonging through understanding their cultural needs, you will have this beautiful, harmonious, and obviously there's going to be issues, there always are in every workplace, but when you provide dignity, a sense of belonging, you will get that through into it will always come through into the guest experience, without a doubt. So it's about providing belonging very much for me.
100%. And it's interesting what you said about context. It wasn't until this particular role where this could shine. And context is really, really key. Because like we do say that whatever your role is, look to bring in your unique strengths to that role. And that is really important. And 90% of the time it's true and it works. There are occasions when we're just in the wrong job.
Yeah.
Right? A few nods there. So, you know, I'm similar to some of your qualities. I've got communication, woo, etc. And I know those times I've been stuck behind a computer just doing budgets and stuff, I've been absolutely miserable. Right? So I think the context is really important for, are we able to leverage and use our strengths? And by the way, everybody, I hope as we're going through this and you're listening to Rosina and Joe, you're maybe having a think about, what floats my boat? What am I really good at? It'd be an interesting question to explore further. So what we're going to do now is move us on. And in a very practical way, we're going to do, in a sense, 2 things. We're going to look at where Joe and Rosina have actually used their strengths within organizations to effect. And the lens through which we're doing this is through the lens of inclusion, right? In terms of where they've helped to create a really inclusive culture. So let's keep the order going and go back to you, Joe. So this is a reminder of Joe's top 6 strengths. And Joe, these are the examples that you've picked out from your career. Do you want to just bring these to life a little bit and share about how the strengths have interwoven with actually with the results?
Yeah, I think one of the key scenarios is that I absolutely believe that you can mix your brand purpose with profit. And I think very often I talk to a lot of organisations that they say, well, what's the return on investment? And I prefer to switch that round more to, as opposed to the ROI, what's the DTI? Where's the desire to invest? Because there is so much proof that I come back again that if you actually have a diverse team, that you have a better team. You know, we work in an industry where we're taking people around the world, where we have employees, in the case that when I was heading up Celebrity Cruises, part of the Royal Caribbean Group, over 20,000 staff from around the globe, 70 different nationalities on board each of the ships. And from a cultural point of view, it is so important that they felt truly listened to and that they truly felt that they belonged. Because we absolutely saw that if the guests saw that the crew were really happy, then happy crew absolutely transferred into happy guests. And one of the things I'm very proud about is that post-COVID, over 90% of the crew came back to the brand. And that's because of the way in which they were treated during COVID. As you all know, the cruise industry literally was in the eye of the storm, and getting them all home, getting all the guests home, hundreds of thousands of guests home, and then bringing them all back slowly by slowly when we started up. And one of the things that we really did a big focus on is that the marine industry is predominantly male. It's a very male industry, only 2% female mariners actually across the whole of the industry if you take cargo and the cruise leisure industry. And we didn't have any female captains, we didn't have any female leaders on board. And one of the real focuses that we made is over a 5-year time frame, we moved from 2% to 32% female officers within the organisation. And the most important thing about that is allyship, because we wouldn't have been able to do that without our incredible male allies who absolutely drove the agenda and drove to make sure that actually we were attracting, as everybody says, oh, we're an equal opportunity employer. Well, there is a big difference between equality and equity. And as I say, equality is giving everybody a shoe, but equity is giving everybody a shoe that fits and adapting it accordingly. And there are lots of females out there who have the ability to be great captains. And I'm delighted to say that it's now 30%, but until it's 50%, we shouldn't be happy. And you can see there's a picture there that on International Women's Day a few years ago, we were the only cruise line that was able to actually have female leaders heading up the whole of the cruise line from one of the sailings, from captain to chief engineer downwards. And that really was a feat. And that really was mixing our purpose with making profit as well. And interestingly enough, the result of that has been higher NPS scores amongst our crew and higher NPS scores, Net Promoter scores, amongst our guests. And as I said, it's a joint thing. This is not about women. Women can't change the world on its own. No group can change the world on their own. Allyship is so critical. And that's the one thing that I'm really passionate about. And when it comes around to my strengths, I think galvanizing people behind that, using my woo and positivity and maximizer is something that I think has probably helped. And actually, once you see the power of that engagement, it is a beautiful thing to see and to really experience. So those are one of the key projects. Another one.
Oh, Joe, just to dig in a little bit more. So
yes.
You mentioned the woo, the winning others over, the positivity was quite fundamental in achieving those amazing results, by the way.
Yeah. And that wasn't me. This is a global team effort, right?
Yeah,
I was
but can you just help bring it to life a little bit?
Yeah.
Like, in terms of the use of those strengths, because I'm sure there would have been pockets of resistance. There would have been,
Well, the starting point is that if you're going to make any change, you have to have top-down buy-in and bottom-up empowerment. That's the way that if you don't have that, it simply doesn't happen. And therefore, from our chairman down, from the chairman to the CEO to the global brand presidents, there was an absolute buy-in of this, and that then empowered other people. And actually, what we were able to do then is galvanise the cynics. Yes, there were some cynics, and there were some people saying, oh, off we go again, banging on about the women thing. But actually what happened is, as people then saw the benefit of it, the change came about. And actually, to be honest, you know, success breeds success. Positivity breeds positivity. And that's really how that came about.
Thank you. I think you're going to go on to another example here.
Yeah, and just another couple. One of the whole things is the employee resource groups. And I think a lot of organisations now have employee resource groups. And, you know, it takes time to set them up again. You have to have real executive sponsor buy-in. And one of the things that we did, again, we're talking about 20,000 staff members around the globe, is that all of the executive sponsors of the LGBT group, the Network of Women group, the Gen to Gen, the Generation to Generation group, the multicultural accessibility, all the executive sponsors were allies. And again, that's what made a difference, because the more, again, if you only have a group of people, the same group of people talking to the same group, change doesn't happen. So the learning curve of actually all of the allies learn more than those who actually were the group members. And you truly then get to listen to people, get to understand the different cultures, because there is, although you wouldn't quite believe it after yesterday's vote, there is more that unites us than divides us. There is. And it's so important that we genuinely look for that, and that people genuinely feel that they're listened to, and that they're heard, and that they can make a difference. And these employee resource groups they were global groups, resulted in great movement between countries, which was another great thing, great networking opportunity. The generation to generation one I loved, because I learned so much, especially from a social media point of view, being a sort of old tech numpty that I am. So, you know, all of these things work both ways, so that they were significant. And the final one, if I may just, is the representation. You know, another thing that we looked at, even today, you look at so much of the travel marketing, especially in the UK, it's better in different markets. And again, I come back to Ewan's point earlier about the level of DEI truly in the travel industry. We've got such a way to go, considering everything we're talking about is bringing people together from different cultures and different backgrounds. If you look at the marketing imagery, it is still heterosexual, mum, dad, and 2.4 kids. I never know where the 0.4 comes from, but they do. So why is that? And I talk more about the UK. I know it's different cultures. And we did a massive, genuine project. Actually, it was led by Annie Leibovich, that was, as you know, a very well-known photographer who curated it. We got worldwide photographers, genuine photographers, and guests, not actors, and actually changed the whole face of the marketing. And the key thing we did is we made all of that marketing open source to competitors, to all of the travel industry, and to other industries. And interestingly enough, more people from other industries took the photography than a lot of the travel industry. But they're three key projects that genuinely made a difference.
Brilliant, thank you. I just want to ask you a question, actually, which is, forgetting these strengths for a second, and just feel free to shout out, right? Listening to Jo, listening to her share those three stories and the strengths, just shout out some words that you think represent her as a leader. What would you say? Just shout out some words. Aspirational. Yep. Aspirational, inclusive. Sorry? Passionate. Innovative and empowering. Yeah.
You're embarrassing me now.
No, it's all good. Right. No, I'd also throw in a couple of extra. I'd throw in a connector.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of her stories and a lot of her strengths is about bringing people together. And I would also throw in a creative. Right? Some of these ideas are pretty cool, like, you know, getting in touch with Annie Leibovich. Have I pronounced the name correctly? World-class photographer. You know, photographers from different backgrounds. That's pretty industry breaking at the time, I think. So then imagine you're Jo's boss. And you're saying, hey, Jo, listen, we've got these bit of tasks for you. And I understand and I recognize you're a creative. You are the creative on the team, or you are brilliant at bringing people together. So what I was thinking and what you think about this task is X, Y, Z. Now, coming back to the very beginning point, the biggest need we have is to be seen. And where that lives is day-to-day conversations at work in this context, right? So it's incredibly empowering if we feel that our boss sees us for the unique value that we bring. Cool. Rosina. So let's do exactly the same with you and look at your strengths and what example did you want to bring to life?
So you'll see on the slide that we've got the wheel, and that is called the Wheel of Privilege. And there's many different versions of it, so it can be adapted and changed to suit the context of the training that you're doing. And when I've done intercultural training within the hospitality sector, I often start with this because the training is often at the kind of managerial level, so whether it's GMs or the real kind of leadership. And actually, the last time I did a training, there were more women in the room, and I did compliment the male allies in the room for that, because you're so
Really?
right, Joe. Yeah, those women were there in that position because of the allyship that
Yep.
they had from their male colleagues, for sure, and absolutely all of their hard work. But the idea with the Wheel of Privilege is that everyone can place themselves on this wheel. There's also the Wheel of Diversity as well, which is, I haven't included, but I recommend everyone go and have a Google and have a look at it, because everyone can be placed on that as well. And often when we talk about, or when people think about diversity, they may think, oh, that doesn't include me. I'm heterosexual, I'm male, I'm, Middle England, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody exists on the Wheel of Diversity, and everyone exists on the Wheel of Privilege. And the closer you are to the middle, the more privilege that you have, basically. So one example that I give often within the hospitality sector, because it really relates to so many people, is that post-COVID, we know that there's been this staff retention issue, and many larger properties are using agencies to hire in their staff. And a lot of people are traveling to other countries for work, which can often mean that they rely on a visa. And that visa is attached to their place of work, which makes them very vulnerable within that situation. So someone in the same job that is from the country that they live and work in, that doesn't need a visa, has automatically more privilege than their colleague whose job relies on this visa. Who's going to speak out in this situation? Who's going to stand up for themselves? Who's going to risk their job if they feel that they're being discriminated against? Not the person who relies on the visa. So that takes away so much privilege from people, and takes away their power, basically. So the idea with using the Wheel of Privilege is that it helps us recognize our position in society and our influence or lack of influence, and where we might be able to move. And it's very fluid, it can change and it can move. And it's also about highlighting then how we speak to other people. So oftentimes, based on our privilege and where we sit on this wheel, can often determine the way that we communicate, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. And the way that we then communicate can often create an inclusive or an uninclusive environment for other people. So that's why I start with this in training scenarios. So the kind of example that I like to use here is that I recently did a training with a group of hospitality professionals, all very kind of senior level general managers and leadership teams. And we were training on that particular session on inclusive language. The group wanted to be seen as a safe space, an inclusive space. And they knew that in order to do that, they needed to do top down. They needed to empower their leadership with the right terminology, the right language to communicate with their staff. And I often think when we're talking about it again in the hospitality context, I see it so much about the staff first and foremost, because by providing a sense of belonging for your staff and a safe space for your staff, that will always translate through to the guest experience.
Can I ask about some of the specifics here aside of the wheel? There's going to see some extra bits. I know what's coming up. And how you kind of use your strengths to kind of inform and power that work?
Well, I guess I'd like to think that in those situations, a lot of it is for me to create a safe space for everyone in the room, regardless of how they feel about the topic of the conversation. It's a difficult conversation to have, and I think that as a developer, I can come into the room and regardless of how they feel about the subject, put them at ease with talking about it. So empowering them, providing them with the right language and terminology, because oftentimes people feel uncomfortable because they don't know what does LGBTQIA plus mean, you know, and I'd rather not talk about it because I don't understand. Whereas actually let's discuss, let's empower, let's not judge, let's create allies.
Yeah.
And by empowering people and providing the right language, we can then make them think about it. So this particular example, when I was doing that training session, there was a team member in the room that he kind of put his hand up and said, I want to share that my daughter's just come out to my wife and I as gay. And previous to her doing that, inclusive language didn't mean anything to me. I put that down as something not for me, not interesting, doesn't come into my world. And it wasn't until his daughter shared her sexuality that he realized it's very much a part of his world. And he got really emotional because we had created a safe, non-judgmental space for him to share that. And it was a really touching moment where everyone in the room kind of had this realization of, okay, maybe I don't feel like this matters to me, but something could change in my family, in my life, and then all of a sudden I need to know, I need to be educated.
Yeah, thank you. And often the way in which these strengths work is that they work in relation to each other. So one of the things that definitely came out when we did this debrief was empathy, which you'll see is Rosina's number 5. So there's a lot in what Rosina says that is about being sensitive to and creating a safe space for. Like that just shines through in everything that she shares, right?
Yeah.
To add on that, on the inclusion,
Yeah.
I think a lot of organisations or a lot of individuals, this thing of shying away from saying the wrong thing is something that we also need to help people with, because I think if people get, if people say the wrong thing, most people do it unintentionally. They don't intend to do it. I mean, there's very few people in the world, and unfortunately some senior people in the world, that say things unintentionally to hurt, but most people don't. And therefore I think it's a two-way thing here. Therefore, I think if people should also not get easily offended.
Yeah.
And the group shouldn't get easily, people should listen to it and just explain as to why actually the language is the language. But I think having that understanding of inclusive language is so important.
Yeah.
So interesting that there's so often I hear that we don't need why do we need this? You know, we are inclusive. Why do we need this? We are an equality employer, etc., etc. People don't really get it's people who genuinely, as you said, at the core of privilege, who don't think that they need to understand.
Yeah,
it.
which is why I often then show the wheel of diversity.
Yeah.
Because everyone exists on that wheel.
Absolutely.
Do you have a gender? Do you have a religion?
Yeah.
Do you have a family? What is your age? You know,
Yeah.
everyone exists on it.
Yeah.
But
I'm just going to need to move us towards the close soon, just
Sorry.
as a heads up. It's okay, just
Yeah.
wanted to make that
Yeah.
point.
But just the last point that, following on from Joe, I've been in so many DEI groups and conversations where even professionals and people trained in this will use incorrect terminology, misgender somebody, and again, we're in a safe space, and we correct ourselves, we apologise, and we move on. The bigger deal that it's made of it, the more embarrassing it is for everyone in that situation.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we've understood the power of strengths. We've deep dived with both Joe and Rosina and looked at it come to life in organisations. I'd just like to share a personal example of a project I did. I'm also a photographer, and I worked with 18 female leaders across 5 countries. And I used a combination of coaching and photography to help them elicit and understand their strengths and thinking, how could they be brought to life? And in most of those examples, it changed their lives in some way because they just did live into their strengths more. And one of the conclusions this resulted in a TEDx talk and stuff, and this is one of the conclusions that I came up with. if you can see a strength in others, you'll be loved, right? People like to be seen. If you can see my strength, amazing, right? If you can see a strength in others they didn't even know they had, you'll be remembered forever. And some of the time, we talk a lot about self-agency, but sometimes we're not good at looking at ourselves and seeing our own strengths. And I guess a lot of you are leaders here, either formally or informal leaders. And one of the key takeaways we can all absolutely do is just to pay a little bit more attention to our people in terms of their strengths. What do they innately bring? And how can we be reshaping work according to those strengths? So in terms of some practical takeaways, I'm going to stand up for this. I would say the following, right? We all yearn to be seen. Deep down, we may pretend we don't, we may cover it up, we may be resigned, but deep down, we all want to be seen and we want to be useful according to our own strengths. If we're in the business of delighting our customers, creating these incredible experiences, we believe a key way into that is to empower our own people. What lights us up? And then we can find out and discover what lights our customers up. It begins with us really using our own strengths, getting curious. You know, you don't have to do a questionnaire. There's many different ways you can do this. I'm happy to talk to anybody at the end. But get curious about our own strengths. What are we great at? And by the way, part of that is understanding what we're not good at. It's not all positive, positive, positive. I shared at the beginning, I ain't great with detail. I ain't great at budgeting. I ain't great with analyzing stuff. So I find strategies and work with people who are great. And really importantly, it's about, as much as we can, recognizing others' strengths. And in the examples that Joe and Rosina brought to life, what they're doing, what I do in my day-to-day work, is in a sense, shape the culture. We provide and we shape the culture for others to shine and to use their own strengths. So thank you very much. And I think we've got a few minutes for some Q&A. So if anybody got any questions, we've got some roving mics. Thank you.
One at the back, Mark.
Yeah.
Somebody's way.
It's pitch black out there, actually. Probably all having a morning snooze.
Hi, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. So I'm an astrologer and also a human design coach. And I would love to follow up and talk more, but have you also applied any wisdom from astrology or from human design into integrating with the Strengths Explorer for hospitality, for, you know, kind of interwork dynamics? That's a field that I'm in, and would love to hear more about that.
You're looking at me, so I'll start. No to astrology, personally. In terms of human design, yeah, in the work that I do with organizations, it's understanding how people think and behave, right? So, for example, I'm a big proponent of nudge theory. So, little and often, making it very, very simple for this kind of a culture to exist. For example, in all the teams that I work with, they have this concept called a high five. And they start a team meeting with high fives. So they go around and they high five somebody for what they've achieved this week or the last week and tie it in with that person's uniqueness, their strength. Very small practical example. What about you two?
I haven't used it. I'd be interested to talk to you, actually. It would be fascinating. Yeah. I do believe in it. I do believe there certainly are traits. So I do think it's interesting.
Any more questions? Unless Rosina has anything to add?
Yeah. There's one there. Yeah.
Oh.
Hi, my name's Hannah. I'll do my best. I get a bit tongue-tied, but there's more question for Joe. When you were saying that you came up with the idea of putting the people in the photography of everybody who actually uses the product, before that you said about you were doing the market research into it. Can I inquire more about what market research you carried out to understand more about the target audience that we talk about today underneath the diversity umbrella?
very simply, just by looking at the amount of the marketing collateral that's out there. And if you look at most tour operator brochures still, if you look at a lot of hotels, if you genuinely look at a lot of the travel and leisure and hospitality marketing, be it social, be it whatever kind, a lot of it still is very, very homogenous. And you know, this wasn't a very expensive level of research beforehand. It was just looking at what's out there.
Yeah, I think just to add on that, for me, I often will look at it, and it's the same with looking at hospitality websites, hotel websites, and the person of colour will generally be the serving staff, not often the other way around. And as a person of colour, I can't tell you how upsetting that is, because I'll look at it and I'll say, so what, am I not even your target audience? Am I not welcome? Do I
think
not
the
belong?
other thing, that it was authentic, it was real, it was real people. I think that's the other thing, yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Oh, well, maybe one more, then we'll wrap up. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. It was very inspiring. My question is, when you work on this culture of embracing all these strengths and positive characteristics of each person, how do you deal with the negatives in a culture like this? I mean, from your experience and like step by step, how would you, deal with those? Thank you.
So what we do in our organization is we, first of all, start very much with the positives. We get people very clear about what their strength is, what value they add, and we create these habits, such as the high five example, where people really increase the amount of positive feedback they provide. That creates a huge culture of trust and psychological safety that's important for the rest of the work to follow. Now, the great work about this work, this strengths, is that we have concepts such as a raw talent, an overdone strength. So, for example, communication is one of my strengths. But if I'm under pressure, if I'm feeling insecure, if I'm feeling under the cosh, I'll talk too much. I'll interrupt. And it'll be noticeable. But for example, empathy is another one of my strengths. So that's really great because I understand the mood, I can read people's feelings to an extent. But a raw form of that is that I take things very personally, right? And if I'm given some negative feedback or I observe something I'm not comfortable with, it will sit with me more than it will sit with most people. So we create a language for that at the right time, where it's normal. It's normal to talk about are your strengths in play in the mature form or the raw form. And it just becomes less of a big deal. They say, Mark, you're talking too much. I think you've got into your raw form. You know what I mean? It's not such a weighty thing to talk about. Is that helpful? Do you want to add anything to that?
I would say just from a team, again, with the team, having done lots of different forms of development exercise. I mean, very often when people get their 360, they constantly then immediately go into focus in, what's wrong and what people have said, etc., etc. I think the value of this approach is that when you're spending most of your time focusing on what people are good at, as opposed to what they're less good at, then it means that it enables you to maximise the team's strengths. And then you'd have that language. You'd say, actually, we need somebody we've got real nitty-gritty information here. We need somebody who's 100% precise, etc., etc. And then and people say, well, actually, we know that Fred and Jane are really good at that. That's not my strength. So rather than people saying, oh, God, well, we know it's going to go horribly wrong when we give it to Joe and Mark, you switch it into more of a positive. It's not utopia. The world's not perfect by any stretch. But it enables you more to focus on those strengths.
I would just add one key thing, that all the work I do, I kind of start as much towards the top of the organization as possible. And I co-lead the programs, these strengths programs, with the leaders. So the leader, I would be coaching and encouraging them to be open regularly about their about their weaknesses, their raw talents, in addition to their strengths, which creates that trust and that opportunity for others to do the same. So we're being ushered off. Just want to thank everybody very much,
Thank
and
you.
we'll just
Thank you
be
very
here
much.
if you want to have conversations.
Thank you. Thank you.